Okay, let's dive in. A fragile girl, she becomes this powerful dragon rider. Then there's this intense love story right in the middle of a war. And hanging over it all, a storm that could, well, wipe an entire empire off the map if you thought the stakes were high before. They've just gone completely mythological, haven't they?
Welcome to the deep dive. Yes, today we are really immersing ourselves in the narrative core of Onyx Storm. It's high-stakes stuff, the source material we've looked at. It establishes this world that's already deep in war. But the real fight, the thing we're focusing on in this deep dive, it's the explosion of secrets, institutional secrets, and how that leads to the collapse of, well, everything the main character, the protagonist, was ever taught to believe in.
Right. So our mission today is pretty focused. We want to give you, the listener, a really solid understanding of the complex things driving this story. We're going to analyze that narrative core by looking at three huge interconnected areas. Okay, first, the sudden kind of systemic collapse of her home, Navarre, from the inside. Second, the fierce, almost frightening transformation of the protagonist, Violet Sorrengail. From this underestimated kid to a force of nature. And finally, that massive moral choice she faces at the climax. Duty versus, well, devotion, love.
Exactly, and the material, it represents a pretty deep analytical dive into this arc. So that means we're jumping in, like you said, mid-war. We're past the point of setting things up. We're right where the stakes are absolutely highest. And all those painful secrets in the past, they're just erupting right now.
Okay, so here's the first big thing for the learner to hold on to. This defines the whole core of the story. What makes this war so different, so much more insidious, maybe dangerous? It's not just a typical border fight. It's that the fighting outside is completely matched, maybe even overshadowed by this rapid, disastrous internal decay inside the kingdom itself.
That's the key. This isn't just armies clashing. It's a systemic breakdown, a political reckoning, really.
Sure.
So if we look at that core finding right from the start, the story kicks off establishing this theme, war on two fronts. We're told, okay, the conflict's already happening against outside forces, fine. But then the sources immediately pivot. They identify the biggest threat, the one that's truly crippling, as coming from within Navarre. The very empire Violet was, raised and trained to defend.
And that shift, structurally, it's brilliant, isn't it, narratively speaking? We're way past just simple border fights or foreign enemies now. When the story uses a phrase like, a kingdom tearing itself apart, well, that signals a kind of failure that no amount of dragon power, no military strength can just fix overnight. It points to something fundamentally broken in the institution.
Precisely. And that distinction is absolutely vital if you want to understand how serious this crisis is. Think about it. A normal war against another country. Difficult, yes. But it usually unifies the people defending, right? The leadership, too.
Yeah.
But this, a civil breakdown, fueled by this deep institutional deceit, it does the exact opposite. It just fractures everything. Trust, loyalty, any kind of coherent strategy, it all goes out the window. The real fight for survival is happening right at the top, politically, and that just undermines morale, resources, everything for the soldiers on the ground.
It's like the worst possible scenario, strategically. You're fighting an enemy out there with, half an army, because the other half is busy watching its own back, or maybe even actively betraying the cause.
And the sources really dig into how this collapse is happening, the specific mechanism. It's the sadistic exposure of lies, deceit. We learn that leaders who once demanded loyalty are exposed as liars. They've been hiding these huge truths that could rewrite the whole war, invalidate years, maybe decades of sacrifice.
Wow, that one line. That's the political devastation at the heart of it, isn't it? Just think about what that does to the people fighting. The loyalty Violet, every rider was trained to feel. The whole code of honor, duty, the foundation of Basjath War College, that place that defined their youth. It's all fundamentally compromised now. They weren't just fighting for freedom or their kingdom. They were potentially fighting to prop up a lie.
And what's really fascinating, the implication that these aren't small lies. We're not talking about minor cover-ups. To hide truths that could change everything. That suggests secrets about the very nature of the war itself.
Yeah.
Or the enemy. Or maybe even where Navarre's power comes from. So the political core, it stops being about winning the war. It becomes this painful, agonizing process of digging up these secrets and trying to figure out which leaders, if any, you can possibly still trust. Because if the people right at the top are proven liars, then the entire cause, the whole reason they're fighting, it doesn't just lose its structure, it loses its moral validity. gone.
Which completely flips the script on what treason even means, right? If your own government has been actively lying to everyone, manipulating the war for years, are they the traitors? Or are the people who finally stand up against this decades-long deception the real patriots? It creates this total, dangerous inversion of military and political hierarchy. It leaves every single soldier just lost, in a moral no man's land.
And this exposure of lies, it leads straight to the question of basic safety, security. The sources highlight this really shocking revelation. The real enemy is not only across the borders, but inside the very walls she once called home.
Let's just pause on that image for a second. The walls of home. Because this is where the betrayal gets intensely personal. The place Violet thought was her sanctuary, right? Where she formed her deepest bonds. Bastia, it's now revealed to be compromised. What does that tell you about the institutional rot in this story? Bastia, the entire leadership structure, they're implied to be, well, not just politically wrong, but fundamentally complicit in the lies.
It creates this atmosphere of just pervasive, crippling paranoia. It must be awful. Every single conversation becomes suspect. Every order could be poison. If you can't trust the very structure that houses you, feeds you, commands you, then you're utterly isolated. Even if you're surrounded by thousands of quote-unquote allies, this is like the ultimate narrative tool for stripping the protagonist of any external comfort. When the state itself betrays you, all you're left with is raw instinct. And maybe the few personal bonds you manage to build outside that institutional lie.
And the sources really hammer home the terrible individual human cost of this internal decay. We see allies turning into traitors, friends becoming enemies. You have to connect this high-level political betrayal right back to the emotional collapse of Navarre.
Oh, the connection is seamless. Institutional deceit. That creates the perfect environment for personal betrayal. It's inevitable. When the structure of loyalty just crumbles, individuals are forced to choose. Self-preservation. Pick a side in what's becoming a civil war. The leader's lies, they ripple outwards. They force good people into making these agonizing choices about who they serve. And for Violet to remember, she's already survived battles, betrayals before. This is next level. The personal stakes are just astronomical. She's fought physical enemies, preventing rival kingdoms, whatever. Now she has to navigate a world where sharing a meal could be a trap. A handshake could be a death sentence.
So the core question for you, the learner, as you approach this whole narrative, really boils down to this. How do you fight an enemy when you literally cannot trust anyone, especially the people who claim to be fighting right beside you? The greatest threat to Navarre isn't the army outside the borders. It's the complete lack of internal coherence. It's like a cancer caused by these institutional lies. Okay, so let's connect that catastrophic internal situation directly to how our protagonist evolves. This pressure cooker environment, Navarre collapsing from within, it demands this huge exponential change in the person fighting for it. We need to really detail Violet's trajectory here, moving from, as the sources say, the fragile girl, the one who was underestimated at Bosvith War College, to becoming one of the most powerful dragon riders of her time.
Yeah, that initial contrast, it's absolutely essential. You have to keep that in mind to appreciate where she is now. She started with this perceived weakness. The narrative makes sure we remember she was mocked for her weakness. You know, her size, her background, that whole setup just emphasizes the sheer, almost terrifying scale of her power now. And the unbelievable journey she's been on. This isn't just